Hello, welcome to the LaRouche-PAC Weekly Report for July the 20th, 2011. I'm John Hofel, and with me in the studio today are Sky Shields from the basement, Elisa Saratani from LPACTV, and Lyndon LaRouche. Good morning.
Good morning. The subject today is a unique subject and of unique importance. Therefore, it's being presented. It was presented last night at a meeting of the leadership organization. It's now going to be presented again here in a somewhat different form of statement. It's appropriate for this occasion, and it will be the major feature dominating the webcast coming tomorrow. So that's what the issue is. This, and we had to do it because no one else had the guts to do it. Essentially, those who knew what the problem was. We are now being destroyed by what is called environmentalism. Environmentalism is one big lie. It's worse than a big lie. It's a determination to decimate the human species from the magnitude of the order of 7 billion people to less than 1. And that's been stated. It's been stated by those who are advocating this policy. It was stated earlier by the British monarchy when they said they were going to put the limit at 2 billion people. This is intentional genocide. And the flag of genocide is the claim that we have an environmental problem. But the only environmental problem is we have too many oligarchs. If we eliminate the oligarchs, we would be fine. And the argument that's made for this is one big lie. There is no such thing as global warming. It's a lie. Now, many people will attack global warming, but they don't have the guts to take it on directly. And therefore, it falls upon some of us, like those seated at this table right now, to take it on and expose the great lie which many governments and peoples are babbling like idiots over. There is no such thing as global warming. Let me just introduce the subject, and then we go into some detail on it. The human race lives in a universe in which humanity is distinguished, not uniquely, but in a very special way. The universe is increasing in what we call energy flux density. We see this exhibited in the case of living processes, the history of living processes on Earth in the recent 500 million years, that sort of thing. We find that forms of life die out and are replaced by forms of life which in general, on the average, are of a higher order of organization than those which died out. The most recent, most famous case of this is the death of the dinosaurs. Because of a certain movement of the solar system into it's a position which it assumes periodically in respect to the galaxy, our galaxy, of which we are a part, merely a part. The whole dinosaur crowd was exterminated. It was exterminated as being also an inefficient species, an extremely inefficient species, which was very vulnerable because it was big, fat, lazy, and dumb, like many of our politicians today. We were replaced, however, the dinosaurs were replaced by a more advanced quality of species, such as the mammal species, which came along subsequently. The mammal species was much more efficient, and the mammal species has come to dominate the planet. But not just the mammal species. The ability of the mammal species to dominate the planet and create a future for mankind up to now was that human beings, essentially, as the leaders of the mammal class, were capable of adapting to this universe and improving it, improving life on Earth. Now the time came where the existence of mammals has depended increasingly upon human beings providing for the maintenance of mammal population. For example, our largest population of mammals, are based on animals we, as human beings, use and correct. They're valuable to us. Cattle, other things, valuable to us. monkeys are entertaining when they don't get inside your house. That sort of thing. We make jokes about monkeys. I guess it contributed to something humorous to our life if they don't get too close inside your house. So therefore, we've come to the point that we're now again, as a species, are moving our solar system in a direction toward the same destination in which the dinosaurs were killed. What are we doing about it? Mankind has a quality which no animal has, and that is the quality of voluntary creativity. Now, creativity is not strange to the universe. It existed before mankind, a few million years ago, came into existence on this planet. Creativity is not new in that form. The distinction of the human being, that while for the animals, the creativity is built into their genetic structure, is programmed essentially, in effect, except for the evolution of species to a higher form. And that's never voluntary. No animal species has ever voluntarily improved its quality. They can't do it. Therefore, in the history of all life that we know of on Earth, we have a process in which species that become outlived disappear. That doesn't mean they were wrong species. It means they were right for their time. And as the Earth changed, they no longer fit the requirement. And they died out, unless mankind or somebody else came along and kept them, kept samples of them alive. Now we come to the point, we have to say, what about humanity? If the mammalia are going into a period where they too now are subject to mass extermination, what happens to us? What happens to the animals that we like, that are useful to us, and on which we depend in part? Are we going to survive? Can we survive? Yes, we can survive. Mankind has shown, in terms of the increase of what we call energy flux density available to mankind, we are able to catalyze, not only improve ourselves and our power, to catalyze changes in the system, which in perspective could ensure that mankind could outlive this great kill toward which the solar system is now moving, just as it moved to crush and exterminate the dinosaurs. Now we have a modern dinosaur among the human species. It's called the environmentalist, who is not fit to survive. Not only is the environmentalist not fit to survive, but if he does survive and remains a dominant force, a political force on this planet, the human species can go extinct. Therefore, we can't meddle with this stuff. We have to attack this publicly, as nobody else seems to have the guts to do. And there are many scientists who know this, but they don't have the guts to say it publicly. Their careers depend upon keeping their mouths shut, or even telling lies. Or they're being stupid, which many leading scientists are, actually. They call themselves scientists, but they're not competent. They believe in things that are silly, and they try to impose it. We're now under a president who is among the most stupid, most criminal of them all. A president who is equipped and committed, like the Emperor Nero, for the destruction of the human race. This president. We must remove this president from office. We have all the evidence needed under our Constitution to put him out of office and to restore this nation, our nation, which has been a leading nation in the world on this cause heretofore, to restore that. So therefore, as we did yesterday, in a meeting we had yesterday evening, we're going to do today, as I'm going to do tomorrow, in the webcast. We're going to attack this thing. We're going to tell the truth that apparently nobody else has the guts to tell. And it is the truth. It's proven. It's scientifically accurate. And those who oppose this are either stupid or liars. And therefore, the time has come to do so. Now, Sky is, in a sense, a leader of a special group in our organization. It's called the Basement. And they not only know things which are useful, they are able to acquire knowledge of things which have yet to be discovered. And that's the spirit we want. We want to unleash mankind and the intellectual powers of mankind to make the changes in the universe, which were traditional to us as the United States, those kinds of things. We're going to take the United States back from these enemies of humanity, from these environmentalists. And you're not going to do it by criticizing them nicely. You're going to take them on by denouncing them as hoaxsters, as frauds, as persons whether knowledgeably or because of stupidity are supporting this so-called environmentalist cause, which is a complete fraud. There's no truth in the arguments of any environmentalist in terms of the political environmentalists today. None. They're all either stupid or liars. And if we allow those stupid or liars people to continue to dominate the policies of our planet in this term of crisis, you are condemning a human species which is capable of doing all kinds of wonderful things. You're condemning them to extinction unnecessarily. And we've got to get this president, who we've got the goods on for impeachment or expulsion right now, get him out of there. Or you're not going to have a United States, and you're not going to have a planet either. Not one with people on it. The truth has to be told. For many, it's an ugly truth. For many, it's an insolent truth. And I like insolent truths because they're truths. And it's the insolent truths that are the best of all truths because they deal with what no one else will deal with. Now, there's one thing here which is crucial. The concept of energy flux density is just a word. It was a term actually developed by a Russian scientist. It was spoken back in the 1970s when I was part of an organization called the Fusion Energy Foundation. And we, with our Russian friends, who were then working as scientists for an agreement between the United States and the Soviet Union, which would secure the nation against the danger of nuclear war, which was a real danger back then. We almost succeeded. We had the former members of the intelligence community, the veterans of the intelligence community. I initiated the policy. I was supported by former leaders of the intelligence community, including a gentleman who became the head of the CIA at the beginning of the 1980s, and other people. We enlisted the leading generals, officers, technically retired as a selected group, in Germany, in France, in Italy, and among people in the United States. We were committed to a policy of progress based on energy flux density, as one of our Russian friends termed it. It's an adequate term, a good term. We were ready, but then we had a change in the Soviet leadership to a British agent, Andropov, who was succeeded by a worse British agent, Gorbachev. As a result of that, the result of the failure of the people of the United States, or among them, especially members of the political parties, who opposed this and sought to destroy this policy. We went through the 1980s toward a breakdown, an economic breakdown of the system of the United States and other nations. We are now in a process of collapse, which was brought on by the policies of those who oppose the SDI. We were right and they were wrong. Now, having come from that kind of background, it's my responsibility as a veteran of generations who have now largely died out to maintain that policy, which is necessary for not only mankind today, for civility in society, but for the future of the human species at a time that we are moving as a solar system toward a destiny with death. We can use these very kinds of powers to which I've referred, which we will discuss. Sky will put his own view on this thing, on it. And then we'll get into the question of what Alicia's special role is here today. And we're going to speak out today, here, in this medium. We're going to speak out tomorrow in the webcast. We're going to tell the truth that all the swine and similar kinds of people out there who want to be swine will not allow us to tell. We will tell the truth. We will not mince words. We will not criticize. We will denounce. We will denounce criminals, not criticize them. And those who are for the environmentalist movement are liars, perverts, and criminals. And I say that because it has to be said. Being polite with these bastards is not permissible. The truth must be told, that they are traitors to the human race. Maybe some of them are also traitors to the United States. It wouldn't be a wild coincidence to find the two things are the same. So,
yeah, I mean, it's not an irony not to be lost is that if the environmentalists have their way, the thing that's going to end up killing us is that very environment that they claim to be associated with. It wants no association at all with these figures. What they're setting up, this is going to be the project that we'll be engaging in. We've been engaging in over the last few months in the basement, but it'll be the theme of the next several weeks of our work, sort of beginning with the series of discussions we're having this week, and then a video which is going to be produced by Cody Jones from the basement. But to give people a real sense of exactly what is it you're talking about when you're talking about the environment, the biosphere, et cetera, because what they're talking about, what the Greens are talking about, is just something else entirely. It has nothing to do with anything that exists, in fact, here on the planet or has ever existed anywhere in the universe. They're the antithesis of that. And it's going to kill them, for sure. And if we move in the direction that they're pushing, it's going to end up killing us, and just by virtue of it being insulted by our very presence and behavior. They're really, well, what are you talking about? I mean, one thing I like is there's a number of these, occasionally you get these discussions or these NASA missions coming from the SETI and other guys where you're looking for a planet that's supposedly in the sweet spot. That there must be some other planet somewhere that's got the same sweet spot that Earth is in. And you hear them talk about it, and the image you get is, well, maybe there really is some kind of perfect confluence of events that gives you Earth. There's the right kind of distance from the sun. There's the right kind of size of the planet. There's the right kind of just various conditions that have to all combine to give you this planet. But then what you forget is that the Earth is not in a sweet spot. The Earth is probably in the worst possible position you could imagine for life, just like anywhere in quote-unquote space is the worst possible. The sun's a killer. The sun left to its own devices, any small organism floating out there orbiting the sun wouldn't make it. Not only by virtue of the interplanetary space, but by just the types of radiations you're getting produced by the sun, produced by extragalactic sources. The sweet spot that we have here, the so-called sweet spot we have here on Earth, is a product of a dynamic, changing, developing anti-entropic process, where every stage in its development goes contrary to the so-called second law of thermodynamics. There's not a single step in the process of development on Earth, of any portion of Earth, the life on Earth, the atmosphere, anything that has ever been in any way, shape, or form in agreement with what the second law describes. And that's important because we've got, as we draw that out, we're going to have a wonderful pedagogy, because that kind of increase in anti-entropy is going to be exactly the kind of the real model we'll be able to look at in order to decide what we want to implement as far as human policy goes, real economic policy goes. It'll just be a model for that one principle. This increase, the theme of it will be exactly what you've discussed, a very important economic principle, this energy flux density. What does that mean? That, again, taking a look at the sun, what this region of the solar system would be if you had no Earth here. We know the environment's completely deadly. We know that by what you get by sending astronauts just a little distance outside of Earth's atmosphere. And we haven't sent astronauts very far outside of Earth's atmosphere. For the most part, they're still within certain protective structures that have been generated on Earth over the course of Earth's evolutionary development. But even in those conditions that they have been sent to the moon, these different regions of Earth orbit, even those have been demonstrated to be dangerous to the organism, because what they're being sent out into is not an empty space. They're not being sent out into some kind of void black vacuum. The fact that we have this mental image of this black vacuum outside of Earth is more of a problem of our cameras and an over-reliance on sense perception than anything factual. Because in reality, you've got something that's completely filled, incredibly structured, so energetic that it's deadly if not treated correctly. And that process, so that's what you've got. That's one. There's a certain amount of, if you were to do energy accounting, you'd say, well, there's a certain amount of energy there. But then if you look at that same process after being acted on by living processes on Earth, you start to realize that there's no energy. Quantity of energy doesn't really mean anything at all. It's actually a really meaningless term. That you take a look at what the Earth's atmosphere does, and then layer by layer, you've got this interface which is transforming that exact same radiation. It doesn't block it. It's not eliminating it. It's not as though we've got some shell around us, some shield. You've got a process of transformation where as those different types of radiation move inward towards us as a singularity, you're getting the restructuring of them. So they play an entirely different role. So for instance, by the time sunlight reaches us, it's no longer this deadly force. I mean, it can be if you're stuck in the middle of the desert and it's just you, the sand, and the sun. That can be. Then it can play a bad role. But in general, it plays this amazing role that's structured by the atmosphere to occur, which is it can take part in photosynthesis. It can take part in fueling major cycles of activity on the planet, the evaporation and transpiration off the oceans of plant life, to move clouds, to move whole weather systems. And in essence, it becomes something, that entire space is restructured in order to facilitate life. In peculiar ways, it refines that intense energy to energies that seem like they're much, much smaller. But they're more precise in terms of their energy flux density. So take, for instance, what happens when sunlight hits the surface of a plant. And what's the process in photosynthesis? You get a transformation there. You look at the plant and you say, well, that plant is obviously not as, in raw energy terms, you want to say that plant is not as energetic as a sun. Right? You can look at the plant and not go blind. You don't have to worry about touching the plant and being burnt. But if you take a look at the plant's actual activity as a result of absorbing that sunlight, suddenly this thing is, in terms of just pure anti-entropic creative potential, this thing takes what this transformed bit of sunlight is orders of magnitude more effective than that sunlight would be on its own. The sunlight on its own acting on the surface of the planet would not shape mountains like you get with plant life. It would not produce an atmosphere like you get with plant life. We start to see what matters there is not some absolute quantity of energy, but it's something which is very well approximated by the term, as you said, energy flux density. It's a qualitative character. It's something qualitative as opposed to quantitative. But what it reflects is a measure of something that is probably better spoken of more directly, I think, as anti-entropy. It's a direct measure of creativity on the surface of the planet. As you start to look at that, you start to realize this. Then when you look at the evolutionary development of the planet, you realize that there has never been, and there will never be, a circumstance which the environmentalists try to describe of some delicate balance of life on Earth. Never happened. Now, at no point was there ever any equilibrium reached on the planet. And if there ever were an equilibrium reached on the planet, life would quickly cease. Yeah. Or rather, you'd have to cease life in order to get that equilibrium because it won't stand for it. Instead, you've got this process of steady development, evolution, not in a Darwinian sense, and we'll demonstrate that in these upcoming videos, that the evolution is not, you will never, ever, ever have the evolution of a single species. Ever. It never occurs that one creature is suddenly transforms and is supplanted by something else. As we'll see, will be the example in one of these first presentations we'll give. If you take a look at the mass extinction around the end of the Cretaceous leading into the Tertiary, the one that people are most familiar with, which wipes out the dinosaurs, that you have the elimination of not individual species, but classes of species. And in connection with that, whole classes of dynamics on the planet. The entire atmosphere is transformed as a result of the behavior of the shift across that so-called KT boundary. And you get along with the disappearance of the dinosaurs, you get the rise to dominance of mammals, but then whole systems that need to be combined to support those mammals all come into play at the same time. The introduction of grasses for the first time, the increased concentration of different types of silicate materials, the introduction of birds, the introduction of flowering plants, the introduction of insects. This is all sort of is brought in as almost an economic upshift in activity. And if you look at the attempts to do so, it's done in a way that's blatantly willful. One example is there was at least one Russian researcher, in looking through the fossil record, identifies that you can find 7 distinct places where you had the attempt of dinosaurs to become mammals. Now that's significant. That tells you that's not some Darwinian accidental evolution. But this is a process that intends to reach a certain state. It tries, fails perhaps for whatever reason, tries again, fails perhaps for whatever reason, then tries, until you get a few of these lines that make it into the present. Same thing you can find with birds. Birds, you find multiple attempts of the dinosaurs to try and produce the different qualities that define a bird. There's a lot to define a bird. And you get them independently trying out these sort of new techniques, trying out the hollow bones, trying out the feathers, trying out the different structure of the various chest bones, internal skeletons. So independently, entirely unrelated creatures are trying to make those steps to move ahead. And you start to realize that you've got something else moving this process that has nothing to do with chance, has nothing to do with thermodynamics, nothing to do in the simple sense with being able to measure heat flows, attempts to approach equilibrium at all. And that the thing that drives it shares this creative capacity that we as a human species have, except that it reflects us in what it reflects in the large is what we reflect in each and every individual. Although for us, this is something that's willful. So then you take a look at that, and then you try and compare this to the fraud that you're getting from the greenies now, the fraud that you're getting from the modern environmentalists, and you look at their silly system they've got of trying to describe the atmosphere on the basis of heat flows and what gases are moving what, and they take a model that you're hard-pressed to apply to a heat engine. You're hard-pressed to apply this to something like to a steam locomotive. Again, barely applies there to a steam locomotive, and they try to apply this to the planet as a whole. And this is the whole discussion you're getting on global warming, the whole discussion you're getting on every statement on climate change. Every statement that you're getting that claims to be discussing the atmosphere is based on applying this model, which is primitive by biospheric standards, but blatantly so. And then the immediate thing that's got to come to mind is, if that falls so far short of even describing the basic facts of evolution on the planet, what's the agenda for promoting that? As you said, you see the agenda in the results. If you take a look at the results of applying this environmentalist policy in the third world, you've gotten mass genocide, willful genocide, the willful and explicitly stated plans for population reduction. When they say population reduction, you look at where that's directed. Prince Philip is your perfect example. He's explicit on this, that he's talking initially Africa, South America, developing countries, the developing world, the undesired peoples. That's what he means to reduce. And then once he's reached a threshold there, he moves it, as we're seeing right now, to the developed world. And you're seeing the exact same policies that have been applied in the name of environmentalism to Africa, to South America. These austerity policies have been applied in Southeast Asia, now being applied directly in the United States, being applied directly in continental Europe. You're looking at the sacrifice of whole nations, that this really is a genocide policy. As you said, their ideological outlook is contrary to the human species, and our lunge over the next few weeks will be to finally eliminate that.
problem here is that what's called the oligarchical principle. Now, in the time of ancient classical Greek, as with the writings of Aeschylus and so forth, there was a very clear understanding of this. And the process leading into the Roman Empire from the decline of Greece, because of its own suicidal tendencies toward what we call oligarchism, is the problem. The typification of this came in a very simple action by King Philip of Macedon in an agreement with the Persian Empire, the Achaemenid Empire. And what they formed was an agreement between the Asian part of the Mediterranean region and its adjoining areas and the European or the Mediterranean part. And this agreement, which had already been established in ancient Greece, was the so-called oligarchical principle. Now, the oligarchical principle recognized that, from a ruling class standpoint, that if the people were well educated and were able to develop, that they would get rid of the oligarchy. The oligarchical principle was the way of trying to maintain a satisfactory arrangement for the oligarchy itself, a very small part of the population. And one of the products, and that was the basis for it. The origin of environmentalism has nothing to do with the human environment, except the attempt to destroy it, which it will do by attrition. So the intention was to keep the majority of the human race barefoot and pregnant, but not too pregnant, not to produce too many people. Because if you wanted a population, if you were keeping it down, as what the environmentalist does, and the environmentalist therefore is an agent of the death of people. Environmentalist is an evil because its intention was evil. And what's it come at? Always population control, population exterminations, people's exterminations. It's always that. So there's no physical reason for environmentalism. The universe has nothing to do with this thing. It's complete fraud. There is nothing honest in environmentalism. It's nothing but dictatorship, where a small class of people wants to control people. And they know that people, given a chance, are not dumb. They will tend to develop ideas. They will tend to develop principles. They'll make discoveries. It's what the human species does. It's the most efficient of all living processes at this business. So therefore, we're not dealing with an objective problem. We're dealing with an induced problem by evil people. People who hate people and want to keep them down and ground under. There never was the so-called African thing, the underdeveloped peoples or the Asians underdevelopment. It was imposed. It was imposed by an oligarchical principle. Why India, for example? India at a time of, referring to, was an advanced culture, relatively speaking. China had been an advanced culture. Other parts of the world have been advanced cultures, more advanced than European. We had American cultures, which were more advanced than European, in the Atlantic, as in Mexico, for example. Well, these systems fell into the grip of the oligarchical system. And they died and failed because the oligarchical system killed them. The desire, take the case of Mexico, take the mass deaths in Mexico, what called Mexico City. These people were evil. The Aztecs were evil. And that's why they died, because evil killed itself. And we came in with the Christian tendency as opposed to that tendency. We came in, and the Christian missionaries, or at least one branch of them, who were not too tied to our enemies, and they did the best they could to bring into South America a natural liberation of the people of that region to come back from freedom from what the Aztecs had typified. The same thing in other parts of the world. No, man is naturally good as a species. Everything in the design of man, including especially the creative powers of the individual person, it has a divine quality to it. It's the love of mankind, the love of development of mankind is the remedy. Now, to protect mankind, we have to create new conditions which will protect mankind against the kind of things that Sky's referred to. And this always involves increase of energy flux density. Means exactly the opposite of what these genocidalists, these bastards, these evil people called environmentalists, at least the leaders of them, intend. Many environmentalists are just stupid. They believe whatever they hear. But those behind it, those behind Wall Street, those behind the City of London, these people are evil. And you should recognize that they're evil. You don't even have to find a crime. Their existence is a crime. Wall Street is a crime. It's not an economy, it's a crime. It's a crime against humanity. And Glass-Steagall is important to us because it kills crime. It eliminates crime. It eliminates Wall Street. People are saying, oh, we need the money. We need the money. We don't need the money. Because monetarism was a mechanism of this kind of tyranny. By creating a currency which has no intrinsic value whatsoever, it has only a nominal political value, with the force behind it to impose it. We had in the American system was based on it precisely this. The founding of the American system from the time of the 17th century was to create in North America a European system which was European in its technology, its culture, but which was free of the control under European oligarchs. That's still the same thing today. European oligarchs are the enemies, the principal enemies of humanity. But to the extent that we have Wall Street, that's the European oligarchs. So we have to get rid of these guys, and the sooner they're bankrupt, the better. Because the instant, if I'm president, for example, I'm too old to be president, but if I were president or somebody who thinks like me, we say, Wall Street, die. We don't need you anymore. We don't need your money. Under our Constitution, we don't need your money. We have a federal Constitution that prescribes for a credit system. The federal government should be creating credit and distributing it to be used for useful purposes. Useful purposes which are broadly defined by the policy of government. And sometimes the government provides this itself, or provides the opportunity of interest to say, we can do something good. We can do something good for society. So the nation state, the local state, the state in the state, or the nation as a whole, must make allocations. Allocations, for example, we have to rebuild a railway system. This buses and these bums transporting around is a very inefficient way, a very costly way. And we think that public works are necessary. Well, that's the responsibility of the federal government primarily, but the assistance of the federal government to the states. That's our American system, a credit system. We don't need a monetary system. We don't need to depend upon money. We make our own money under rules that we adopt, that we introduce. That's the American system. That's our system. And every time we had been free to do that, as under Franklin Roosevelt, he eliminated something. He eliminated the power of the oligarchy and created a system of credit to rebuild this nation from the shambles that have been made by the oligarchs, the British oligarchs, the British in America. And we're at the same point. Now, therefore, you're now in the question of politics. Therefore, science now must find its instrument in politics. Scientific progress is scientific progress. It must find its political instrument in politics, in government. This comes to her department. Right? Because what we've done, as is known, I think by now, we've done is we've enhanced our organization as a political organization. We now, instead of having an informal committee of 3 people actually who make sure that something is happening in the course of the week, then that goes from there, those proposals then go to the various parts of the organization, and in a similar way they affect society outside. So we had that, but that's not good enough. Because the live part of our society today, the part that will push us out of this mess, are people largely between 25 and 35 in age. Because the older people have been discouraged, the boomer generation was virtually destroyed by the effects of the Vietnam War and other things. They no longer have the guts that my generation had. It's not their fault. I still have guts. They don't. Because I belong to an older generation, World War II generation. We had guts. That's why we won the war. We didn't believe in wars of the type that have been run as in the Indochina War. We knew that was nonsense. MacArthur was the guy who advised President Kennedy on this. Now let's get real tough and real to the point. How did we get into the Indochina War? We got into the Indochina War because President Kennedy, who was opposed to this and relied upon the advice of General MacArthur and people of that superior rank, said, no, no, no. We do not go into a extended warfare on the continent of Eurasia. We don't do that. It would be a destructive force and not necessary. But how did the war occur then? Very simply, the President of the United States was shot, and the war proceeded. And that Indochina War destroyed the United States. It created the basis for it. And then, just to make sure we continued that war, Bobby Kennedy, the brother of the murdered Jack Kennedy, was about to become the nominee, the Democratic Party nominee for President of the United States. Mysteriously, but not mysteriously, he was shot. And the shooting of him meant we had this Hubert Humphrey, who was a real clown, as the candidate. And naturally, the Republicans took over. But it wasn't good Republicans. There were a lot of them were fooled about this thing because their partisan policies were stupid. But they carried out the policies which contributed to our destruction. And the election of more people of the same type didn't help. The fact that Ronald Reagan capitulated to this kind of policy, where it was he who had supported my proposal for what we called the saving our United States by getting agreement with the Soviet Union, which we had actually worked to define. And Soviet officials agreed with me on this at that point. But then they were overridden by a different administration. So that was the tragedy of the thing. We would not be in the mess we're in today but for that. So now we're back in politics. Now, the problem is politics. Look at our newspapers. Look at our television. We don't have any media that really represents the United States. We have people in the media who are people of conscience who would like to do things, but the financial control of the whole system is based on Wall Street and London. Therefore, we don't have a political system of education, not only from government, but also from the private institutions of education, including mass media and things like that. So the people are lied to. They're misled, misdirected, lied to, given bad politicians. Politics is now urgent. Politics is now a part of science. We need to create the kind of institutions that present the kind of ideas which mankind has a right to. And therefore we have to have a system of organization which gives us that kind of intellectual access to what the ideas are we need. So we have tried to enhance. What we did, one case, we had the basement. Sky represents the basement. And we've added that to our retinue of our organizations, top-down leadership. We also need, which here is the center of it, we need a system of political education, which is tied to news developments, the things that people need to know, the things that people have a right to know, as opposed to the indifference, the clumsiness, the stupidity, the lies, the follies, the intellectual prostitution that goes with our news media. It was necessary to create that and to build it and build it up, develop it. Now, we may be a small in number, but we ain't dumb. And we can do things, this organization, because of our sense of freedom in ideas. We represent something good and something superior within our national system. Not to take over the national system, but to inform it, to stimulate it, to make it grow. And this young lady, well, and I don't say this without full respect for her, it would be dangerous not to, typifies as a leader of what's here based in Purcellville as a center, typifies what is needed in terms of an educational institution, a real educational institution, a live one, not a descriptive one, but a live one. A leadership, intellectual leadership, composing facts as ideas, which are relevant to the knowledge of the American people in particular. And that's her responsibility, to which she can speak.
Well, think about politics without the conception of what man is. Think about what human politics would be or is right now that's discounting what man as a species is. You know, how far are you going to get? And we have the perfect example. Look at the President of the United States and the people who tolerate him. If you don't take this conception of mankind into consideration, really let it get under your skin, because it's the truth, you allow an oligarchical system to come and run roughshod over one of the most successful nations that in the history of in human history, and you have intoleration of that by having a certain indifference to what the species is. You have you create an indifference to someone like Obama, who is taking down all of our satellite capability, which immediately makes our weather forecasting capability, sets us back by decades. Epidemic and disease precursor system sets us back by decades. Finding out where major drug operations are run, a lot of that's headed up by satellite operations. That's now setting us back by decades. So if you don't have a conception of what mankind is as a species, then, but our enemy does, you're going to be taken advantage of, as we're being taken advantage of right now. And it's keying off of what you said, Sky. You think about the development of the abiotic and the biotic, and now the advent of mankind. You said it's a willful development. You see life taking over the planet, and it's working over the sunlight. It's really working it over and creating the conditions for, flora and fauna to exist on the planet. And it takes many different species, the extinction of species, the regeneration of different species. It takes millions of years of this process to create an ongoing system of development that we live in. Now, what if there were a species that worked in the reverse way? That in one species, they could create similar upshifts without having to go extinct. It was the reverse order. We do have that species. It's mankind. We embodying one species, we can cause the upshifts that it would otherwise take whole classes of species to create over hundreds of millions of years. And so we have that, we embody that, but it is also willful. What we do is willful. And that politics is the means to that end. And were we to see it any other way, how could we scientifically continue to exist? The universe is, in a certain sense, sort of laughing at us at this point. And so it's the rapid education of that as an idea, which is a developing idea. We've barely left the planet to really flex our muscles as a species, because we can take life off of this planet and have it work over the cosmic radiation and the solar radiation. Just work the whole thing over. And colonize. Why not? We can absolutely colonize the rest of the solar system. And think about it also, we have to sort of earn our keep as a species. Take even the tiniest single-celled organism, they had a real function in developing the cyanobacteria. They helped develop the ozone layer. Then different plants and animal species came in and, carried the torch, developed things. And so they're doing a service to the planet, but also to the solar system and to the galaxy, the extent to which we still have yet to discover. So then you say, okay, well, what do we do? How do we contribute as a species? What is our role? And it's far more profound than these single multi-celled organisms, because we have a willful, creative capability. And those are the facts. Those are the facts of the matter. And then you look at what's happening politically. You put what's happening, the fight to shut down Wall Street, to maintain national sovereignty, in that whole context. You see what's happening on the planet, you know, in Manhattan or in London, in this whole context. And from there you can deliver decisive blows. From there you have real political power because you're working with the principles of the universe. And that has to be the mission of a younger generation, because that's what we did before. And it's important for our generation, the generations below us, to know that having a president who wants to kill you is not normal. That's not a normal state of affairs. That is an out of tune political system. It's out of tune with the rest of the universe. And people are reacting to it, not just in the United States, but in the rest of the planet. There's a mass strike phenomenon. People know that there is something out of tune, I guess is the best way to describe it, with what they could be doing. And it's very difficult today to get people to use their imaginations under conditions of pure intimidation. Just intimidation, oppression. I mean, we are being targeted to be killed, flat out. And so having this conception and being able to use your imagination paints a far more dramatic picture of what's happening than the average person might want to imagine. And it's very important, as we open up the discussion, to recognize that, I mean, we need some serious heroes right now. This environmentalist movement is not just a bunch of harmless, you know, kids. They're being deployed. Their ignorance is being deployed to kill them and their fellow human beings, and we have to take that cannot. I mean, as a generational commitment, that has to stop, because we have far more important things to do.
All right, now, it means something else. It means that this organization, particularly in the aspects which we put forward here today, is essential for us, for humanity, not just for us as persons. What we're saying as something unique being said is something that needs to be said for the sake of humanity. If what we're saying, the kind of thing we're saying, is not brought forward and not recognized as a true authority in contending against these things we just announced, there's no hope for humanity. This organization, which is a small organization in numbers, has got to be a big operation and a big organization in terms of its productive and contributing influence. If people want to save this nation, there are many good people in the Republican Party and Democratic Party. They are actually decent people, and they're not unintelligent either. Unfortunately, the organization of the society generally stinks. You have Wall Street dominates the nation, the mentality, the mendicant mentality of the citizen in general, to beg for favors from the money which comes by either directly by Wall Street into the system in selective thing. You want money? You need money, buddy? You need help? If you're nice to us, we might help you. We have to break that. That what these two aspects of our younger leadership represent is something that if the citizens out there want to save this nation, if they want to have children that are going to survive, if they want a meaning for their own existence beyond the morning, they need a leadership voice inside the United States which is not controlled by the mechanisms which have controlled the United States today. Leading Republicans need us for that function. Leading Democrats also need us for that. We are supplying a kind of information which is absolutely indispensable if this nation is going to survive. We don't have to beg for your support out there. We have earned it. We've earned it because we are committed to a mission in your interest, where there's no other voice in this nation which is boldly speaking for what you need to have in your defense. of your existence. The meaning of your life as American depends upon what we're doing, because you're not getting that kind of leadership from anywhere else. We don't have to be in public office. We don't have to be elected. Some of our people should be, just like other people should be elected, to reflect this interest. But we are providing a unique voice on which the very existence of this nation now depends. This is a voice in the service of you out there, to provide you the kind of information, the kind of discussion which you need if your nation is going to survive, and if you're going to survive. So we're not somebody as a commentator from outside somewhere. We are your life. We are the key to your life. We're not the people who are going to take over power in the United States. That we can't do. But we can force you to organize yourself around some ideas you need to know. We can dedicate ourselves to being vigilant in performing that function, and in asking for your support to assist us be enabled to provide that function. That's what this game is all about. And that's what these two younger people represent in respect to an old geezer like me. When I'm God, they're going to be here. Support them.
No, it's good. I mean, like you say, it puts into perspective, the evil of partisan politics. That there's a deep evil in the idea of party politics, especially in a period like this right now. As you said, it's unscientific. And people sense it. The form that people in the population sense it is they realize, oh, you've got the folks who are up there don't have my interests in mind. And they sense that intuitively because they see the effects of it. They see all this stupid squabbling over issues that have nothing to do with the fact that people are losing their homes, they're losing their jobs. If they still have their homes and jobs, it's what they're receiving is not enough to live a normal life on. So you have people trying to work multiple jobs, people coming out of retirement in order to work jobs because the pensions aren't enough to survive on. You've got an overall collapse people can smell, and they realize that they're being abandoned. But the real educational process is to explain to them exactly why and how. As a species, you said the way we operate, we don't need to vanish in order for our replacement to come in. Other animals need that. Animals, in order for the next shift to happen, they need to vanish in order to make room for something that's fundamentally, typically physiologically different in behavior and all of its character. But all we have to do is get rid of our bad ideas. You get rid of bad ideas and you can introduce fundamentally new ones. The shift that we experience is like any other evolutionary shift. What we'd experience right now is going to be something equivalent to what happened in that KT extinction, except it won't be the people vanishing, maybe some. The greenies, the environmentalists, are sort of setting themselves up willfully to be the ones that vanish. They're tenaciously holding on. They're going to be dragged backwards in the course of evolution. Same thing probably with a number of these bankers, that they're intent right now to hold on and be dragged backwards and ground up in the gears of evolutionary progress. But for us as a species as a whole, we don't need to. If we can take these key conceptions and make them self-conscious to people for the first time. And that, as you said, that's politics. And that's something that transcends party politics. The attachment to anything else, to any other institution, to any other set of political issues besides that one issue, should be recognized as an evil act. That it's something that kind of behavior is collusion with the enemy. That kind of behavior is an act of treason against the human species. And there's no hyperbole in that. That's the only thing you could possibly do that would be an act of treason against the human species. It's a small list of things you could really do that would be that absolutely evil. And this is the thing that's in there.
I think we probably have said something, don't you think? A thought for the day, a special quality of thought for the day. And we shall have to do something similar to a much larger audience tomorrow. And what we've said yesterday in one institution is beginning to sink in. What we've said here today defines a concept which probably should be considered on its own merits. as having been said here on this occasion. We shall continue this tomorrow in the webcast and take aspects we did not discuss here today to add to what we have discussed here today and what we discussed last night. It will make it a very good day.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe a good week, maybe next good year.
No, we can have some immediate fun, and if we're going in the right direction, that's good enough. But the time has come to tell the American people they need us. Not for us to have some special power, but because we have committed ourselves to a mission whose benefit they need. And we need to establish our relationship to those of the American people who want that, who want to survive. To say, work around us, work with us. We are your friends who are giving you a service you probably will not get so easily from anybody else. That's not the only service you need. Other people will supply things. But maybe by our doing our job as our organization, maybe we'll inspire people in other organizations to go out and do likewise.
All right. Well, that wraps it up for this week. Don't forget, tomorrow, July the 21st at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, the webcast. If you see this after that date, the webcasts are archived, so come back to the website and watch it, and keep watching because we're going to have a whole lot more. So thank you.